Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everybody, Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. We are back. We're talking about crashing and burning. Ooh, we're here today with Dr. Steve Iacovelli. Hey, how you doing, Steve?
Good, Wendy. Good to be back.
Hey, I love the name of your company, Top Dog Learning Group. Where does that come from?
So actually, my former business partner and I started it when this was a side hustle while we were still at the Walt Disney Company. And her last name is Bond, my last name is Iacovelli, and like Bond and Iacovelli Associates was just wicked stuff. That's not how we are. So we both like dogs, and I didn't even own a dog at the time. And that's how Top Dog was born.
I love it. I don't own a dog either. I'm around dogs 24/7 because they get to go home and I get to go home when I'm done, petting them. But thank you for sharing that. I want you to tell our listeners, why do so many people fail? Why do they crash and burn as leaders?
It's a really, really important and great question, Wendy. Thank you. And I've been in this space for almost 30 years. And over that time in doing this consulting thing, you see leaders who are just rocking and rolling, and you see those who literally are crashing and burning. And as I kind of was like being that little anthropologist watching folks do their thing, it really bubbled up to what I had seen as the top 6 leadership competencies that if someone's doing these, they are rocking and rolling as a leader. And those who aren't doing those, they're the ones crashing and burning. And they're authenticity, courage, empathy, communication, relationships, and culture. And if you're doing these 6 and you're doing them some semblance of wellness, if you will, they're the ones who are going to succeed in the leadership world.
I love it. Talk to me about authenticity. Let's just start at the top there. I mean, some people were like, hey, can you hold your true self back just for a minute?
yeah, just leave that at the door, virtual Zoom or whatever. Yeah. So, I mean, and you're hearing all the folks like the Brene Browns of the world and stuff talking about how authenticity really leads to leadership success. Why? Because it builds trust. People can connect with you. And on the opposite side, when you're not authentic or inauthentic, people can tell. People aren't dumb. They can see when you're doing that like schmoozy thing or playing a part or not being your true self at the workplace. And so when you're an authentic leader, that's power, that's connectedness. And I talk about those 6, again, authenticity, courage, empathy, communication, relationships, and culture. And they are so gorgeously intertwined, you can't separate them. If I'm being authentic at work, that's courageous right there. If I'm building relationships, well, I'm automatically shaping the culture around me in the workplace. And so they all kind of intertwine in this little hairy, messy, awesome ball. But if you're doing all 6 correctly, you will succeed as a leader.
Teams with inclusive leaders are 17% more likely to report good performance, 20% more likely to report making high-quality decisions, and 29% more likely to report cooperating. Further, it's been discovered that a 10% increase in views of inclusion enhances work attendance by about 1 day per year per employee, lowering the cost of absenteeism or lying about being absent.
Mentally absent.
Yeah, that's hilarious and not. But, for some of our viewers or listeners, they may be thinking, well, one day per year isn't a big deal. Yeah, but if you have 100 employees and they're physically absent 1 day per year, and like JC just mentioned, if they're easy to check out, call out, clock out, not think about work at all, then they're also very easy to quit and stay or take your paycheck, but do the bare minimum because nobody's really asking for my opinion anyway. So folks, it is important to become inclusive. And what we mean by that of being a good leader, it's not just about being a good leader of, oh, I have my ducks in a row. I have policies. I have procedures. I treat everybody the same. Man, do we really treat everybody the same? What are your thoughts on that, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, let's just call it out. Every single human has some sort of bias, whether it's conscious or unconscious, and we tend to favor those people who are part of our pack, part of our group, in groups and out groups. And so when a leader accepts that and starts to be paying attention to that, it's when they can get a little bit closer to treating each person in a fair way. Of course, we connect with people differently. That's the whole relationships thing. But a smart leader will start to manage those biases they might have as far as favoritism and preferential treatment and connectedness. Yes, you have your friends at work, but smart leaders know to be mindful of that and really work to kind of not fall into those potential biases that they might have.
I wanted to actually comment on the unconscious bias part because I was literally just doing a training on it this morning, and it is not what people think, it's unconscious, and so somebody was asking me recently in a 2-day management workshop, hey, how do I get over this unconscious bias? I'm like, first of all, you got to admit that you're biased. You got to admit that you didn't know. I myself took the unconscious bias assessment years ago on age discrimination, and it said that I was discriminatory against older people, which is basically older than 40 in the USA law. And that means I was discriminatory against myself and my friends. Yeah. And I really had to sit there and think about what does that mean? And what I realized was I was doing so much training on generations in the workforce that I became very, very protective of the younger generations. And then I became biased towards older generations, which really isn't old. Right. But, for me, I was like, okay, let me take a step back. And now I switched my training around because I was like, well, I don't want to I don't want to be that. And B, I don't want to be seen as that. So the unconscious bias, folks, we got to rip that Band-Aid off and say, we don't know what we don't know. What can I learn? And so I would encourage everybody to do some kind of assessment. And when this goes live, I'll post on LinkedIn and on my social media where you can get those free assessments.
Yeah, Project Implicit is a fantastic
resource.
That's it. And exactly we actually, in our unconscious bias, I stopped calling it unconscious bias. I call it being consciously inclusive because it's more active. I had a person in one of my training classes years ago who's like, well, if it's unconscious, I can't do anything about it. And, that's not the attitude we want. And if we're going to be smart leaders, we want to be consciously inclusive. And to do that, to your exact point, Wendy, the first step is awareness of what biases I have and I don't.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks for listening to episode 2 of our 5-part series on inclusive leadership. It starts with you. In our next episode, we're going to cover coaching to success, including why people fail at coaching. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.